Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I'm your host, Dr. Leslie Joseph. Thank you so much for joining me. It is still Black History Month, everyone. So I would still encourage you to take some time and learn about some of the great Black Americans that have contributed to the culture, to the prosperity, to all that America enjoys as a nation. I would encourage you to continue to do that. Go and follow some good organizations that are putting out good content for Black History Month and just educate yourselves. It's good to know these things. It's good to know that all of us have contributed to what's going on in America, not simply one group or another. So take the time out and learn more about our shared history, which is also Black history. And so we are still on the podcast talking about the language of justice. And so in honor of Black History Month, we're talking about race, we're talking about ethnicity, all those things all month long. And on this episode, we're going to talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, you've probably heard a lot about it in recent years. I mean, there's DEI initiatives and policies all over the place. Everybody's trying to show that they too are diverse and equitable and inclusive. And so every corporation, it seems like every university, every school district, every industry has some type of DEI component. People are all about it. Now, some people love DEI. They think it's the perfect thing at the perfect time. We need it. So glad it's here. Some people don't think it goes far enough to actually address the issues, the racial issues, the social issues that are in our society. And some people just hate it, can't stand it, can't believe that people have fallen for this DEI thing. What is going on with that? That's what some people would say. And they are actively trying to undermine and dismantle any kind of DEI initiative, any kind of policy you can imagine. But we're not going to talk about all that. On this episode, I just want to make sure that we are precise with our language and that we're on point when we talk about DEI, because it's easy to get sidetracked. It's easy to get confused and to be misunderstood and to be in a place where what you said isn't what they heard, and what you're trying to accomplish is different than what they're doing and what they're accomplishing. And so we just have to make sure our language works and it does what it's supposed to do. So let's talk about that on this episode of the Environmental Justice Lab. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Environmental Justice Lab. I'm Dr. Joseph. Thank you for listening. And on this episode, we are talking about DEI, and I specifically want us to think about how we talk about DEI in our justice circles and whether or not it actually serves our purposes, right? Is it actually doing what we think it should do, or is it doing something else? Something to think about. But first, before we even talk about that, what is DEI? What does it actually represent? And so obviously DEI is an acronym. The D stands for diversity, right? The idea is that this organization, this group, is representing everyone and that we're encompassing the diverse populations that we either serve, or that we're responsible for, or that are a part of who we are, right? It goes across different racial categories and ethnicities and gender and religion and socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, what else? Political affiliation, religion. That's that already? Religion, whatever it is, we are the kind of organization, the kind of group that represents all of these different types of people. Now, you might not have them all in your organization right now, but the idea is that we have the kind of culture and the kind of initiatives and the kind of atmosphere that would welcome all these different types of people. You're all welcome. You can come here. We're a diverse, wide-ranging group of people in this space. That's the D. The E is for equity. And the idea with equity is that you're treating everyone fairly, right? You make sure everybody has what they need. They have the same opportunities. They have the same resources, the same support, the same engagement. We're all being treated equally. This person isn't treated differently than that person because of some, identifying characteristic, right? Because they're different races or different genders or different whatevers. Like, we're all treated with equity. That's the E in DEI. And then I is for inclusion. And that's when you are working to make sure everybody feels valued and they're included and they're comfortable and they're able to function in the space, in this place without any concerns, right? So a lot of times you have meetings, you'll have gatherings, and everybody doesn't feel like they're included or welcomed into those particular events and those particular moments. But if you have inclusion embedded into what you're doing, then we'll all feel comfortable coming together for whatever the reason is. And so that's the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, it's been around for a while. A few decades, people have been trying to foster these kind of environments, trying to push for these kinds of initiatives. But it really picked up after George Floyd's murder in 2020. I don't know if you remember this, but a police officer kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 10 minutes and literally snuffed the life out of him and killed him. And then there were huge protests, huge marches, an uprising. This is during the pandemic, an uprising of people who were frustrated, who were angry, who could not believe, I was one of them, could not believe that that kind of thing could happen in America, that a police officer would be able to simply kill a man on camera in that way in front of all these people with no seeming accountability whatsoever. And so after that happened, after those marches and those protests and the riots all across the world, corporations and organizations started to say, I think we have some problems here around race in our country. And so then DEI became a big deal, very prominent all over the place. It's even somewhat of an industry now. It's like an apparatus. There's DEI consulting firms, DEI consultants and experts and blogs and companies and groups that can help you with your DEI initiatives. And companies are now hiring diversity officers in their executive branches of their organizations. And they're continuing to demonstrate that they have DEI as part of the fabric of their institutions. And so now we have DEI really ramping up, really getting bigger and bigger and bigger, up to the point where now there's backlash. And a lot of people are pushing against it, trying to dismantle it, saying that it's exclusionary, that the I is really an E because you're not inclusive, you're exclusive. And the diversity is leading to situations that are not producing what we intended. And so there's a backlash now. So we had the ramp up and now people are trying to dismantle it. But I'm not concerned about all of that. My concern is when we are here and we're talking about things like environmental justice, we're talking about things like environmental inequity. How does DEI impact the way we talk about those things? And are we actually getting our message across? Because here's the thing. When we start talking about the D in DEI, diversity, and I mentioned this in the last episode, that can easily be taken to wash away very specific concerns that very specific communities have. Because if we're talking about diversity in the broadest sense possible, then by extension, we're including so many different people that we're actually missing the reason why we wanted diversity in the first place. And usually that reason is to correct an injustice against a very particular group of people or particular community. And so I've seen this before where you might say, hey, this institution has been discriminatory towards X people. Let's just say Black people, for instance. And we all agree. And we say, okay, we should do something about that. But what we don't do is any intentional effort to correct the wrong done against those Black people that we referenced. What ends up happening is we have a diversity initiative that would allow anyone to become part of what we're trying to do here to make this place more diverse and more inclusive. And so now, sure, Black people are welcome, but so is everybody else. And so you're diluting the reasons why we were concerned in the first place, right? You're kind of washing everything together instead of being targeted and specific about the issues that concern us. And so it's a big problem for me when we talk about justice that people can kind of slide the diversity into the discussion and minimize the very particular concerns that you might have, or that I might have, or that anybody might have. You know, could you imagine if we said, hey, this organization has kept out women its whole existence, and they agreed, but instead of welcoming in women specifically, they said, we have a new diversity initiative. And so now you have men from all different backgrounds coming instead of the women who were initially discriminated against. That's the problem. And that would be a problem if that happened in an institution. What should happen is, I'm sorry, we should not have discriminated against you based on your gender. We will correct that and allow women to be a part of what we're doing. Or Black people, or Hispanic people, or, you know, any religious group that was excluded prior to some situation happening. We welcome them. And we're very specific because we're fighting for justice. Let's not forget, we're not fighting for diversity. Diversity was supposed to be a means to get to the justice, to get to the correction of the wrongs that were perpetrated. So I'm perfectly fine if you're an industry, if you're an organization, and you want to diversify your staff and your leadership. You should definitely do that because it's much better if it's diverse than when it's not. But let's not confuse the two. Don't think that because you've brought in some of this group of people that now we're all thankful and satisfied with what you've done. No, we're not. No, we're not. Because the issue is there's a particular group of people that need their injustice addressed, and you need to do that specifically. I'll give you an example. So I am a professor at the University of South Carolina. The University of South Carolina was founded in 1801, clearly before the Civil War was fought. Clearly, people were excluded from the university based on their race. And at that moment in time, it was primarily descendants of enslaved Africans who were kept out of the university. Fine. It was like that all over the country. We understand it. As time goes on, those things change. And now here we are, 2024, and we all see and know that there's a huge disparity in the student population and in the faculty makeup from department to department, and it needs to change. And we know that based on the history, Black Americans were excluded from the university based purely on their racial categorization. It was because their skin was Black that they were left out, that people that looked like me were left out. That's fine. Let's correct it. So what do we do at the University of South Carolina? We have a new diversity, equity, and inclusion office, primarily developed after George Floyd's murder. Like I said earlier, that's when most things started happening. You bring in a nice team and we want to have some diversity initiatives. Now, here's the problem. Are those initiatives targeted towards the people who were excluded? Or do we believe that if we hide behind this DEI label, that will address the concerns that people have about the makeup of the faculty and the student body while still maintaining some front that we're not really directly helping the people that were harmed? Because now we have to think about both situations. The people who would say, hey, you're doing reverse racism by helping a particular group. And the other side saying, wait a minute, you've harmed them for so long, it's time for you to make it right. Now, if you're a justice-minded person like myself, you're not concerned about that first group. I'm trying to make sure that the people who are excluded are now included. And so your initiatives need to reflect that. They don't need to be this kind of broad, expansive, we want everybody everywhere to come in no matter what. And so now when you have an initiative, you have international students and you have, white women because they're underrepresented, and you have different religious groups represented and all these different entities and affiliations that we need at the university, but they weren't the reason why the initiatives were pushed for in the first place. What was the initial root problem that we're trying to address? You have excluded a very particular group of people, and we want them included. And so if you don't include them explicitly, you're not correcting the wrong that you committed. And so that's what I'm concerned about. That's why I say we have to be very specific about who we talk about when we talk about them. We can't talk about minorities, because if we say minorities, then we can find any person who's not white, bring them in and say, look, we're dealing with the minority issue. That's not the issue. The issue is Black people in this instance. It could be women. It could be Muslims or Jews or Christians. It could be Republicans or Democrats. It could be low income or impoverished people. It could be LGBTQ individuals. Like whatever the group is that we're concerned about helping and correcting the wrongs done to them, we need to say who they are. And then when we see the actions taken, make sure those actions directly contribute to correcting the wrong to those very specific people. That's what justice does. That's what justice says. That's what it sounds like. You don't get to hide behind the diversity, equity, and inclusion office to kind of try to convince me that you're working on it. Do it. You can do it through the office if you want to, but make sure you do it. And so I have a problem with a lot of the ways that DEI is being sold to us when it comes up in discussions. When we talk about racial inequality, we talk about income inequality, and then you hit me with we have this diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, or this office, or this diversity officer. Well, that's great. Is that person doing the things that help with these issues? Or do you think just having that person, just having that office is enough to make me feel better about the possibilities that these things might get confronted and addressed? I don't think so. I need you to actually do the thing that we're talking about. And you can call it what you want to call it, but I need you to do it. And do it the way we're saying it needs to be done. Not hoping that it kind of gets done along the way while you do a bunch of other things too in this office that you now established. I don't need that. I have issues with that, right? I have issues with the performative aspects of DEI. Oh my goodness. People love to try to convince you that they're doing the things that you're asking them to do when they're not doing anything at all. It's just ridiculous. And you know how this goes. The social media post with the, African colors in the background or the rainbow in the background. Yeah, we see it. We see it. I'm sure you want us to believe that you're actually doing something to help. We see the performance, right? The statements. It's Black History Month, right? So you see the Maya Angelou quotes. You see the Martin Luther King Jr. quotes. We see them. But are you doing anything to actually bring about what they were talking about when they made those statements? I can't do the performance. I can't. You're dressing up. You're taking a picture with the Black person that works there. You're highlighting them online on LinkedIn, on Instagram, a little quick bio. I know he works there and I know she works there and I'm sure they enjoy their job. But what are you actually doing? Are you writing a check and giving it to an organization that actually does this work? Are you doing this work? Are you partnering with organizations that do this work? What are you actually doing to help with this issue that we have in our society where people who are not white are being treated less than those who are? What are we actually doing? I can't do the performance anymore. You can't convince me that because you posted something or that you liked a certain post that somebody else posted, that you actually are fighting and pushing for change. I don't believe you. Another thing that really bothers me is a lot of times we lose sight of what's really important when we get swept into the DEI world and the DEI initiatives and the DEI offices and the fight to keep DEI. And it's like, wait a minute. The whole point of DEI in the first place was to deal with these particular issues. It was to make sure that we all had clean water to drink and that we all had a fair shot at getting a job and equal representation in the workplace. DEI isn't there for DEI's sake. It's supposed to serve a purpose. And so people are distracted by these efforts to dismantle this and to remove that and to defund this. What about the actual reason why it exists? Let's focus on that. So if you want to get rid of DEI, that's fine. Whatever. The whole point is we have real issues to address, real problems to confront, real people who need justice, who need to be treated with fairness and equity. I'm not here to just simply fight for the DEI stuff unless the DEI stuff is doing that. That's where you lose me, because I need you in the DEI office to be fighting for these issues and to be a voice and to be an advocate for those who don't have that voice. That's what I need from you. I don't need you to just be able to say you have it and then there you go. One thing I love about USC is when all this stuff about dismantling DEI came about and people are having their DEI offices defunded and removed, ours just changed the name. They just said, hey, if it's the DEI that's bothering you, we'll call ourselves something else. We'll give it a different name, because they understood it was about the mission. It was the mission that mattered. It wasn't about the name or saying that you have it on campus. It's about actually doing the work and doing the thing. That's what matters. Don't fight to keep a name title thing so you can say you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. Tell me what you're actually doing, and then you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it the office of scrubbing the floor, whatever you want to call it. As long as it's fighting for what we're fighting for, then it's fine with me. Another problem I have too, there's just so many issues. I'm going to call it the DEI trap, or maybe pitfalls of DEI, or whatever you want to call it. These are some of the issues, right? So people are performing, we're losing sight of the issues. And the last thing, a lot of times we confuse diversity with justice. We think that because we see a more colorful picture of a workforce, that we're achieving justice, that we're actually getting things that we're asking for, and that we're actually seeing gaps close in income and in education and in wealth, and we're not. Right? The fact that you have a more quote unquote diverse group of people in the building doesn't always translate to the outcomes being more equitable and fair and just for the people who are impacted by whatever the issues are around them. So let's not pretend that, oh, we're here. We have a Black person, a woman, and a Native American, and we have this, and we're good. Problem solved. No, it's not solved. It's not solved at all because we didn't come here for that. Now, some people did. Some people said, hey, I want to see more diversity in your organization. And it's true. I want to see it too. But there's a reason why we want to see it. And the reason is because people are typically excluded, and now we want them to be included. And so by having a more diverse workplace, it gives us hope that you are actually becoming more inclusive, that you're actually reviewing and listening and hiring people who can do the job well, who don't look like you. Fine. I want to see that too, and that's important. However, if all you're doing and all you're trying to accomplish is getting people who look different to work together in an organization, that's all you're trying to do, I'm not as interested as I would be otherwise, because getting different faces, getting different skin-colored individuals in a room doesn't always relate to differing outcomes for people who are struggling, for people who are marginalized, people who are set aside and disregarded. So the idea of having a diverse group is supposed to mean that the ideas, that the viewpoints, the perspectives, and the engagement is different because you have different types of people there. And so it comes back to the issues for me. Like, I want to see the issues get addressed and confronted. And if it happens through these diverse groups of people, thank you. I want to see it. If it doesn't, then the diversity didn't really accomplish much. It didn't really do anything. It didn't really move the needle for what we're looking for and what we're trying to accomplish. And so if that's not the case, then I'm just not interested. I'm not. And so we have to be mindful of these things. When we start talking about the issues that concern us, the people who are impacted by these issues that concern us, we can't allow the presence of a DEI officer or an office or a division or a consulting group or a consultant to distract us from whatever that issue is that we're trying to address. You know, if you're concerned about the quality of the water in your neighborhood, it's not enough to have a female or a Black or an Asian or an Hispanic mayor that comes and talks to you. What's really important, that you have someone who's willing to fix the issue and confront the problem. You don't need a different colored face giving you the same lip service and you leave with the same problem. And you're supposed to be happy because that person that told you they can't help you was more diverse than the last time they came and told you they couldn't help you. I don't want that. I want to know that all of these efforts, all of this time and energy is going into institutions and into these DEI offices in order to bring about real lasting change in our society, real lasting improvements for people who have consistently been excluded and consistently been overburdened with the way things are done. That's what we want. We don't want to fall into the DEI trap. We don't want to fall into the DEI pits that would keep us from moving in a direction where we're all treated equally, we're all treated fairly, we all have access and opportunities to be what we're trying to be. That's what we're looking for. And so the DEI stuff, I'm fine with it. It's no problem. It's a step in the right direction, potentially, but it's not the end. It's a means to an end. And that end is justice. That end is equity for everyone. That end is true, reconciled inclusion for all of us, where we are all comfortable and confident that we're getting the best we can out of the people around us and that we are not being unfairly maligned or mistreated by the way policies and practices are performed around us. That's what we're here for. And so if your DEI office does that, if your DEI officer pushes for that, then I want you to keep that going, keep that funding, keep that structure in place, and keep making a difference. If they don't, then I'm not concerned if your governor doesn't want your office anymore. It wasn't doing the job anyway. We don't need it if it's not doing that on the behalf of the people who are struggling in our society. And if you need to change the name so you can keep doing it because the words diversity, equity, inclusion make people uneasy, that's fine. Change the name. Call it something different. I've seen people call their offices the Office of Workforce Development, the Office of Engagement, right? The Office of Opportunity and Access, and whatever works for you and your team, just change the name. We're not tied down to names and labels. We're tied down to actions and impact. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So all of my friends out there who want to see justice done in your communities, if there's a DEI officer, an office, someone who's on the ground with you, keep supporting them, keep lifting them up, keep fighting on their behalf because they're fighting on your behalf. If that's not happening, don't worry about what the governor or the mayor says about their program. If it's not really on the ground doing the work, it doesn't really matter. And so let's make sure that as we talk about justice, as we talk about real, lasting equity in our society, that we don't fall into the DEI trap. We're not distracted or sidelined or sidetracked by discussions around DEI. We stay focused on the issues, and whoever's willing to help us with those issues, they are more than welcome to join us, no matter what they call themselves, no matter who they are, no matter where they are. That's what we should be focused on, and that's how we can change our language around this whole DEI discussion and understand it in its proper context and understand what it truly is designed to do and make sure, hold them accountable to do it. That's how we should move forward. And that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening to the Environmental Justice Lab, where we are for the people and for the planet. See you next time.